I'll go ahead and be honest with you guys. I didn't think I'd like this arc. I mean, obviously I've never seen this stuff before, but actually seeing it, I'm just sitting here going, okay. I don't mean to be dismissive. It's reasonably well done. It's just, I don't like this kind of thing. So there's a living force and a cosmic force, and you must let go, and it just gets a little bit too mystical for me, and that's just not my kind of thing. I mean, we've got this hovering people and the echoey voices and foliage everywhere. You notice there's a lot of pollen in the air? Obviously, they're doing that as a visual shorthand for there's lots of life here. But I like the idea that Yoda just goes there, achoo, achoo, achoo. Anyways. And of course, they are all talking about how Yoda is the one who will save the universe from a great imbalance. Considering the state of the galaxy as of the end of episode 8, I'm not sure about that anymore. But on the other hand, it is worth noting that by most accounts, Palpatine's reign is the most destabilized the galaxy has ever been, with the possible exception of KOTOR 2, if we're assuming that is continuity, which of course we are. So I can kind of see that. Obviously the galaxy isn't going to be perfectly paradise and rainbows forever afterwards. But at the same time, he did save the day, right? Stopped the
Oh,
big bad, made the dog bark, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, just food for thought. I also like that Yoda accepts that he has darkness within him, and that accepting it and embracing it, that hubris, is what actually allows Yoda to move forward. Now, I don't mean to kick a man when he's down, but that's what Yoda's been failing at all this time, and I kind of like the idea that basically right at the finishing line he learned this lesson, because that would help him to teach Luke that lesson in the way that he, let's be as blunt about this as we can, failed to teach Anakin about. I do like how they call serenity and emotion, and he calls Ahsoka a Padawan. That was an interesting thing. I want to give special praise to the designers of this, the creators in general, for the illusion room. It's one of those things that's really brilliant and not used all that well often in fiction. It's a deliberate usage of sound design in order to make a point. In this case, people were talking. It wasn't completely silent, but it instead gave across the impression of everything being muffled. Because the only sounds were the people talking. There was no wind, no crowd, no city, no birds, no bugs, and of course no music. So the whole thing just kind of came across as sort of muted, without actually being completely silent. Brilliant audio design, and it made the whole thing much creepier than it should have been. And of course, Yoda finally rejects it. And I wish I could say I felt more about that, but ultimately all it felt like was this is an illusion you have to reject, rather than there being a why there. Why does Yoda have to reject this? Now, of course, I can already see some of you lunging to your keyboards right now, so let me go ahead and give my interpretation of why Yoda had to reject this. Because ties back into that will of the Force thing I talked about last episode. That it is the will of the Force that all of these Jedi die, all of the children die, all the masters die, and that Dooku betrays them and goes evil, and the galaxy gets screwed. That is the will of the Force, and thus Yoda must accept this horrible fate in order to proceed forward. I'm not really 100% sure what I think of that, legitimately. It makes me wonder if there's any possibility that, well, like I said, that the will of the Force is wrong. Or, to put it to put it more nicely, that the will of the Force is simply not right enough. And then, of course, we have to go to Moraband. They actually call it Moraband and Moraband. Um, I know it's Korriban. I know that. I get that Lucas has the right to do this because it's his work, but it kind of irritates me that it's been called Korriban for years and has been in multiple different works, comics, books, video games. I mean, Korriban is a long-standing part of Star Wars mythos, and pretty much, near as I can tell, just because he wanted to, because he thought it sounded better, let's call it Moraband instead. That sounds cooler. The one thing I notice is that I shouldn't say notice. I did some research on this to try and figure out why the hell it was called Moribund, and there's a note that says that they mention, well, it's been called different things over the years to try and help explain this away. Whatever. Next up, we're almost done. We're almost at the very end of the Clone Wars, at least until they start up again. I'm actually kind of curious how this will line up. I haven't really mapped out the schedule for this. I don't have it in my calendar like I do most of my stuff. So tomorrow will be, or possibly next week, we'll be seeing the end of the Clone Wars, and it'll be very curious when we'll see the beginning of the Clone Wars again. In other words, when Season 7 happens. Either way, I'll see you next time, guys.